First of all, thanks to the organizers, thanks to streamSAVE and Nelle and Ivana and Claire and her team. And I think it's super important, what have been discussing so far, because it's kind of things like tidying up in a way, between heat messages, but also sort of like energy management systems. And myself, I'm the policy director for energy efficient industrial processes. And I mean, from the very beginning, basically the two key work streams that we did, were like heat recovery or management of the heat in industries and energy management systems. But when I looked at the panel, when I had the first look, at the organization of the program, I noticed, there were kind of two quite distinct blocks, really. I mean, on the first one, we have Elisabeth and Torben. Elisabeth especially presenting the streamSAVE system, and Torben, basically coming, from kind of heat recovery and looking into the connections to the district heating. And then we have presentations from Livio on energy audits and energy management systems from Italy, and then Karen talking about how things will actually work better, for the SMEs. But this kind of initial shock, sort of like the vision of the program, sort of grow up, into kind of a story, because it's for industrial energy efficiency, the key thing is actually heat. And this is something, that comes, very strongly through the streamSAVE. And from our work, we've been trying to bring it more strongly, through the energy management systems. So basically, kind of building up, through the heat, and then seeing, how actually that's evaluated into the energy management systems. I mean, we've been listening about like energy monitoring and energy, but it's sometimes confusing, because very often we have kind of focus on electricity and kind of overlooking the heat. And I know like Euroheat Power, they've been like working quite a lot, into bringing heat into it. So, without taking any more time, pass you to Elisabeth. Thank you.
Well, then, good morning, or already quite late morning for my afternoon as well. My name is Elisabeth Böck. I've been working for Austrian Energy Agency and monitoring the last period of the Austrian EU scheme since 2015 now. And in streamSAVE, I was responsible for the development of the bottom-up calculation methodologies. Neda already presented this quite shortly in the morning. We prepared a guidance document with 16 newly developed bottom-up methodologies on the estimation of energy savings. This always includes the calculation formula for Article 7 and Article 3 savings, indicative calculation values for the methodologies we have prepared, which are most of the time based on EU values. So it is rather advised that those values are still edited to national circumstances. Then the explanation of the methodological aspects that are behind the methodology and a list of data sources. So when using our methodologies, it's easier for you to get an idea on where data can be found. Then additionally, we prepare the estimation of relevance costs connected to the energy saving actions and the greenhouse gas savings. And now I'll jump to the methodology that we will have a closer look at. And basically what I said before about the individual, about the about the indicative calculation values. This is not true for this methodology only, because while preparing the methodologies, we did realize that it doesn't make sense in the context of industry to have any standardized values, because this is mostly up to measured data, as there's so much variety in processes in industry that you just can't find a reasonable way to generalize this. So for heat recovery, we prepared 3 methodologies. the feedback of excess heat into the same process, the use of excess heat for other on-site applications. So both of those methodologies are actually staying at the final customer or the industrial site. And then heat recovery for feeding into a district heating grid. So in this case, the energy savings are not happening at the industrial site, but rather with households or district heating customers. So what's the main problem with this? In the 2014 to 2020 period, Article 7 savings refer to energy sales to final customers. And since 2018, this is now slightly changed to Article 7 savings are targeting final energy consumption. This is a small difference, which is relevant for heat recovery as there might be changes in eligibility. So our baseline situation in all methodologies is that the heat production is used to operate an industrial process, and the excess heat that is happening in this process will get lost either to an unusual and not usable temperature level after the process, or different temperatures and levels that are needed between the processes, or because there are timely discontinuities, like, for example, the operation of production in shifts. Then first methodology, feedback into the same process. So basically you have excess heat that is coming out of one of the processes and then used to, or the hot medium is fed back into the same process. So you need less energy in order to heat up to the temperature level that you need. So the final energy savings are actually happening within the affected process. How to calculate for this? You do have the final energy consumption before and after the action, and this needs to be measured. In order to make sure that you're doing this correctly, you should definitely normalize this by the production output or other factors, but production output seems to be the most reasonable in most cases. So to make sure that you also include differences in production within the methodology. Also, our methodology gives a more detailed guidance on this, on what energy do you need to consider, because of course, if you feedback the heat, then you should also consider additional auxiliary systems, like, for example, pumping energy and so on. Then feeding into another application. So this means that at an industrial site, you have the waste heat and you will use it, for example, to heat the other buildings that are office buildings or whatever on site. So energy savings are still happening at the industrial site, but they are happening not in the process, but rather, for example, replacing heating system and so on. So calculation here is that you have the recovered heat consumption of the application, and then multiply this by the conversion efficiency of the main heating system of this application. So basically, so make this a little bit, paint a better picture of this. The heat fed into the heating system of a building as compared to the efficiency of the main heating system of the building. And as we already had discussions about behavioral effects and so on with DEESME, this is something you should also consider, like, for example, well, if the heat is free or we're having it anyway, why not put up the temperature in winter a little bit higher, because who likes to sit at 19 degrees? Me not. And then feeding into a district heating grid, which is definitely the most complicated methodology to grasp. The methodology, as we have prepared it, reduces the energy input of final customers. So savings are not actually occurring on the industrial side, but at the final customer by comparing the conversion efficiency of a reference heating system to the conversion efficiency of the district heating system. So reference heating system would ideally be for every building the heating system that is replaced, for example, a gas boiler, an oil boiler, whatever has been installed there before. But when looking at such methodologies, this will most likely be a mixture of different heating systems within a community. So we explained how we made a weighted average of the reference heating systems within an area. We used basically all heating systems installed in Europe, but this should definitely be corrected for national circumstances or even regional circumstances for that matter. So calculation for this methodology is that once again you take the excess heat that is fed into the district heating grid by the industrial side, so by the heat recovery, and then reduce it by the heat losses that will happen in the district heating grid. And then to calculate the savings, you compare those two heating system efficiencies. So one divided by the efficiency in the baseline situation, which would be the reference heating system, or either the boiler itself or this weighted average, and the efficiency after the action has been implemented, which is the efficiency of a district heating transformer station. Another thing when dealing with an action that is integrated in such a big topic or such a big installation as a district heating grid is that you should also account for extrinsic effects, because basically this is to prevent double counting, because there could be the case that, or basically, yes, the heat recovered and fed into the district heating grid will make prices lower, hopefully. But at the same time, there might be a subsidy for the connection of the heating grids. So in order to not count savings twice, from a policy perspective, you should take into account, okay, how many of the connections to the grid will be made due to a subsidy program, how many will be made due to district heating getting cheaper, and so on. And with all methodologies that are around heating or final customers, it makes sense to also include a factor for behavioral change. Like already explained, if heating gets cheaper, people might decide to have it warmer at home. So this also needs to be taken into account. And that's it from my side. Since we have a very tight program, I decided to keep it short.
So basically, from this kind of very inspiring framework of heat recovery, we're moving to the district heating sector, and I know Torben from his presentation is going to bring some extra elements, apart from the kind of pure technical viability of the connecting excessive industrial heat into the district heating, and he's also going to be using example from supermarket and from the brick making.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I can just start introducing a little bit, because actually I represent EHP, Euroheat Power. Yeah, I've not used their template because I had some misunderstandings and so around this. So I have my template from the company I come from. I come from Danfoss, but doesn't really matter so much. I'm talking about waste heat, excess heat, how to use that when you feed that into a district heating system also. And to say district heating in that sense is sometimes, I would say, really necessary also, because how would you otherwise be able to share waste heat or excess heat. It would be impossible, yeah, unless you would have to use it on site at your own facility. And yeah, here we go. So yeah, I think it's okay, isn't it? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not working.
So I just started with the more. Okay, goes here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit the same slides as Elisabeth. She started showing a little bit about the energy saving you get in the district heating system when you apply district heating to people who did not have district heating before, more or less, yeah. So this is an energy saving. It's not on the primary side, yeah. The primary side comes here, and here you get the full amount of saving of what you put in as a waste heat, yeah. And of course, you have to subtract the small amount of waste in the or yeah, you can say waste or efficiency of the district heating system itself. But the interesting thing is that there is so much energy available that is lost today. And I've been working with this really for a long time. Been working especially on supermarkets as a case. And as always, the devil is in the detail when you start applying it. And supermarkets are very often interesting because there are so many. Most of them, you can say, we basically have a fridge at home and we have a fridge in the supermarket also capacity-wise. So they use a huge amount of energy. They also produce a lot of heat in that sense. In many places, still that heat is just gone into the air, even in the winter time. Then it's about well, you have to collaborate also with the district heating utility, and that's also another barrier very often because you have to get to an agreement on how to do that suddenly because you start selling and buying at the same time. You have a lot of heat to sell in the summertime. You don't have so much to sell in the winter time. Then you have to buy again. That's normally a tricky thing. And normally utilities would say, all right, then we are not interested until they get to know their own system, because very often they can really benefit of having a lot of relatively cheap waste energy during the summertime because they can close down part operation of their gas boilers or biomass boilers or whatever. So it's about get a good business model, sell all your heat into the district heating grid and buy it again, basically, and make a kind of agreement how you do that. That's a very easy one, and it's easy to account also, basically, energy-wise, because metering is already there. So what I did was actually to use some of the older numbers I had and said, well, if you look at how many supermarkets are in the EU, it's around 230,000 supermarkets. And if you just say that they would have an average capacity around 200 kilowatt maximum, then they would be able to produce this 30 terawatt hours per year in waste heat, which is okay, yeah, I would say. Then you can calculate the energy efficiency with this strange formula in the beginning. The energy efficiency savings are not that big because the number you have to multiply with is relatively small. It's not about pushing away primary energy. You have to remember it's only the saving itself by applying district heating. But the primary energy savings is 27 terawatt hours based on that number here. And the interesting thing is also that then you can start actually also applying other types of sources, because in this case here, you can say the machinery, the heat pump or the cooling system itself is only utilized 25% in its capacity. So you can actually add another one if you want to take heat from the outside and put into the district heating. That will really give some super nice numbers also. And again, then you have to multiply with the PEF value. And this is taking as a kind of average for the EU, but we know that some countries, they have very, very low PEF values also because they have a lot of wind energy, they have a lot of solar energy. So of course you have to take a look at that. I think the interesting thing is that it really takes off now because technologies have been developed. And during the last years, it seems also tax authorities and so they start recognizing that they have to give a kind of room for this. And this is just an example of a very happy owner of a supermarket because he reduced his energy bill with 90%. So and that's actually the feedback we get every time those systems are installed and connected to the district heating system. It's people, they nearly don't believe how much energy that is actually wasted. Then I took another example, a local one also. It's about a brickyard. A brickyard is a huge energy consumer. They use normally gas or coal for heating up the ovens for making the bricks. So here we made an investigation also, and it's going to become true also next year. The interesting thing is that you have a lot of high value waste heat here, where you don't need actually to do a lot. You just basically transfer it directly into the district heat. But then you have a lot of low grade heat here, which is around 27 degrees or 30 degrees or something, where you dry out the bricks at the end. And this is very comparable, for instance, also to data centers, where you will see that kind of low grade heat also. It could actually be a data center, but what you need here is you need a heat pump simply to lift the temperature level. And the heat pump is happy because the 27 degrees is a high temperature compared to if you would have to take, seawater or something else, air, or which would have a much lower energy content. So in that sense, it's actually, again, a very good case. And you supply here 68 degrees, which is also important. Don't go higher as necessary in the district heating grid, because then you just ruin your efficiencies. Only go for the lowest possible temperature you should do. And then I guess you get all the slides afterwards, yeah. But what you can see here is also that it's we are talking about the gigawatt hours just on this brickyard here, and equivalent to the supermarkets. This smaller brickyard here would be around 20 supermarkets in that case here. So I think there is no one super big facility. I think the biggest one I can really think of of the new ones are the data centers, because if some of the very big players there, they place a big data center there, then we are talking very, very much of waste heat, and please ensure that those big data centers they are in proximity of some big cities also that can utilize that heat. That would be very nice. So I think that's more or less it. I think, yeah. Just to.
Well, thank you, Torben. And basically, you have brought in kind of, apart from this sort of technical viability, you also brought in talk about the business model. And it's important for the companies to be motivated to use their energy elsewhere. So, I mean, just kind of like a little question in the lead to Livio's presentation. I mean, actually, how do companies perceive? How do they perceive the waste heat? I mean, you use the example, which is a brilliant example, like 95% of the cost being saved. But otherwise, if SME or I mean, supermarket is run basically almost like SME, if they don't measure, if they don't have energy management systems, or if they don't measure, how do they perceive this energy that they can use? Or do they perceive it at all?
I think our experience is that they really want to do this, but there were too many barriers also, and we unluckily we went out maybe too early, because at that time in certain areas you simply had, even instead of throwing out your energy, when you wanted to reuse it, then you were taxed of the energy you reused yourself. Yeah. So it was totally crazy. Yeah. And I think in many countries there will be a lot of very old legislation in the energy side that have to be somehow removed. Yeah. Can also be others. Funny things around the size of the system that you put into your supermarket, for instance. If you connect that to district heating, then suddenly you produce energy, and in many cases you are not allowed to that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll take questions from the audience after the full panel. But Livio, basically, I mean, from the FIRA, you present about energy audits, and it's just, we're looking now into the companies and how do they, following on the question, how they actually perceive, this sort of like energy use. And you can, look at this, and also how they're motivated. And then we're going to come with Karen, with actually, how do we drive, this change from the companies, to the energy efficient? Please.
Thank you, Dusan. Good morning, everyone. I'm of the Italian Federation for Energy Efficiency, which is an association that deals with energy efficiency and renewable energy sources, supporting operators and policymakers. We are also DEESME partners, Project DEESME partners, but my intervention will focus on white certificate scheme that is the Italian obligation scheme and is one of the main support scheme for companies to implement interventions recommended in energy audits. So we saw that the main barrier, one of the main barriers for the realization, for the implementation of energy efficiency measures following an energy audits is the lack, in many cases, of support schemes. In Italy, we have a range of local and regional policies to incentivize, and we have the white certificate scheme that is the main tool used at national level. I try to speed up the intervention, and I'm confident to do it thanks to the Irish colleague that has already anticipated many concepts, and there are a lot of synergies among the two schemes in force. Just to briefly recap, in Italy, white certificate scheme is in force from year 2001. It's a market mechanism, so we have an energy obligation for energy distributors that have targets to fill yearly. From the other side, and they are the demand of the mechanism. From the other side, we have a range of voluntary parties, first of all, ESCOs and energy experts that are able to realize energy efficiency projects, achieve a white certificate, and trade these certificates with the obliged parties. So it's basically a market mechanism. Going into the focus of the presentation, that is the metering of energy savings, you already saw that there are two possibilities to count the savings through given savings and monitoring plan. In Italy, until 2017, that is the year of release of the last key decree about white certificates, until that year, there was the possibility to achieve white certificate without any measure, and it was a scaled projects, the so-called standardized projects. It was enough that you fill a template, an algorithm provided by policymakers, by ministry, declaring the number of units installed, and automatically the number of white certificates were calculated, so without the need to measure anything. From 2017 on, also for the standardized methods, there is the need to provide the measures. For the standardized, there's the possibility to measure a sample of the population and then extend the results achieved in this sample to all the units installed. The alternative is the monitoring plan projects, that it's a full metered methods. So you have to measure all the parameters involved in the interventions and all the adjustment factors. And in Italy, white certificates is the sole scheme that provides effective metered savings, because we have, for example, tax deductions, tax relief, thermal account, that are deemed for scaled savings. They provide an estimation of the saving, and often they are not verified, fully verified. White certificate, on the other side, is the is the sole scheme that provides effective and verified savings. In a project application that has to be presented before the start of the project, before starting the work for the projects, and the definition of measurement, to staying on the measurement topics, what has to be included in this project application, of course, the definition of measurement and verification program, so information on the metered variables, information on the installed meters, and the algorithm and the adjustments, and the ex-ante consumption. Then we'll see later which are the requirements for the ex-ante consumption. But in the project application, ex-ante consumption has to be metered and declared together with an estimation of the ex-post consumption estimation, because at the moment when you present the application, project has not been started. Then yearly, after that intervention is concluded and is going on, yearly you can present the certification of the effective savings achieved. Going into detail of the measurement, for the ex-ante consumption, you have to provide 1 year of measures implemented with hourly meters. So you have to install dedicated meters for every parameter, and you have to provide 1 year of measures. And this, of course, represent at least in the first period after that this update was introduced. This represent a challenge. This represented a challenge for the companies that was not ready to had not installed already the meters and was not really ready to present this project basing on these requirements. But there is also the possibility to reduce this 12 months of measures if proponent can demonstrate that long less time of measures is representative of the 12 years. And in this framework, also the implementing body, GSE, has provided some guidelines explaining some possibility to do so. But basically, the main requirements is to provide 1 year of measurements. And what are the lessons learned? Of course, this is an approach that has pros and cons. What are the main lessons learned about this? Of course, and I already anticipated this at the beginning, this meter-based, I would say so, mechanism improves the project quality, because you deal with effective and verified savings. It improves the qualification of operators and provides a lot of valuable data to the authorities. Of course, provided that these data are really well used from the managing authorities, but this is another topic. From the side of proponents, this metered savings stimulates to achieve higher performances, because if the incentive is proportional to the savings achieved, of course, you are stimulated to do better, since it's verified and demonstrated. From the other side, of course, this approach needs flexibility. It's key to have some flexibility, and it's something that probably is lacking in Italy in the last years. And we saw in the last slide when I show you the trend of energy savings during the years. This flexibility, for what I was saying before, for example, for companies that were not ready to apply since they didn't have already installed energy meters, or for companies that have difficulties to measure 12 years of consumption. They have available a period less than 12 years. If you don't give flexibility on this task, this can be really an issue. So the best way is a mix between a mix of scale savings and meter savings, and this is what we should tend. The last slide, let's see what happened in terms of savings, and this justifies what I've just said. You can see from 2017, that it's the year when the brief was released, there is a decrease in the energy savings, probably because of the lack of this flexibility, as well as frauds that were perpetrated in the last years, but mainly for the lack of flexibility. Policymakers are working on this, are actually working on this for a revision update of the guidelines of the mechanism and integrating it with a new auction scheme to stimulate the achievement of saving. So let's see what will happen. We are also partner, and profit to say we are also partner of a small project that will be mentioned then in the afternoon. We are dealing also with these topics, so we'll keep update on this. Thank you for your attention. I'm at disposal for any questions also during the lunch break. Thank you.
Thank you, Livio. I mean, this is interesting because it basically kind of it tells what the companies might do or might not do. I mean, the word that you use is kind of companies are stimulated to make some energy savings. I mean, following on the question I had to Torben, I mean, why would companies actually make a move? Why do they decide, really? And do these regulatory measures, do they really kind of incentivize companies? Or do they need to be forced to be more energy efficiency or connect to district heating networks or to be kind of broadly connected? Or is it, what is kind of enough, to kind of motivate companies? I mean, we see that energy audit systems being introduced, but what is missing is like next step. Basically, the implementing, energy audits, into something, for the companies to do and to build up, more sort of energy efficiency environment, either like, by introducing energy management systems as mandatory or using a waste fee or whatever. But now, looking at motivating companies, hopefully a little bit more than stimulating them. Karen.
Thank you very much, Dusan. And as you say, short of forcing them to be more energy efficient, what can we do? Well, I'm here to give you the answer. So I am Karen. I am project coordinator for the European Covenant of Companies for Climate and Energy, which is a pilot initiative run by DG Energy. The objective of which is to reach a critical mass of European companies and to encourage and support them to step up their contribution to a clean energy transition. It provides, at the moment, a pledging to encourage businesses, in particular SMEs, to take that action to reduce their carbon emissions. And I'm just going to quickly go to why it's important to reach SMEs. They make up most of all EU businesses. They contribute 64% of industrial pollution in Europe, and 40 to 45% of these are considered to have a large environmental impact. So unless we reach a critical mass of these SMEs, there is no net zero. And this is why the covenant is really important. This is why acting with them and understanding their motivators is really important. So I'm going to go back to the genesis of the pilot, which started in January 2022. It is, as it says, a pilot initiative. This is an iterative process. We learn as we go along, as we talk to you, as we get guidance from our steering committee, Ivana, Dusan, as we increase our partner network. We need to understand all the initiatives that are there on the ground to support people in order to be able to promote them to the companies. We are trying to plug gaps. We are trying to exploit synergies and not to duplicate existing efforts. We started out with a trial last year of type of advisory services that companies could avail themselves of, whether it was online guidance or actual one-to-one technical assistance. This year, thanks to the feedback we've had from them, thanks to evidence that we've picked up and research that's been done, we have integrated a pledging scheme there is considerable evidence to show that companies, people, when they pledge publicly to act, are more likely to do so, to follow up on that action if they've pledged. And then if on the cherry on top of the cake, if they're recognised, publicly recognised for having done so, that's an extra incentive. So there we have the system whereby you pledge to act. You are then offered different types of assistance depending on the ambition of your action, and you are recognised for having taken that action publicly. This is very important for businesses. So looking specifically at the pledging recognition, we have 4 levels. We start at an entry level, which is as broad and as basic as possible, because most SMEs, remember, have not made a start on their decarbonisation journey, and they need to be encouraged to do so. They are then able to move up towards the net zero nirvana gold level, even though this may take several years to do so. In terms of what we provide in for advisory services or technical assistance, this ranges, as I said earlier, from overviews of what's available in their sector, in their country, or at EU level for them in order to help them decarbonise. Most of them have no idea. Ivana was talking earlier today about the lack of awareness. They have little finance, and they have very little expertise in-house in order to do so. So they need people, they need to have easy access to people who do understand what's out there and what's available, whether it's online or one-to-one. In our first call last year, it was very small, but it replicates the research that's been done so far. The vast majority were at the beginning of their journey, the vast majority of them wanted an energy audit, and the vast majority then wanted, after that, an action plan. The audit wasn't enough. They then need an action plan. They need assistance in assessing the results of the audit and which steps to take first, when, how, etc. So as I said before, we had this call last year. We've now launched this May. We launched our second call, and we will put all that into a learning because the initiative comes to an end this year, but we hope that we'll be able to extend this period. DG Energy here. Let's keep it going. We're pretty confident this is going to keep going in whatever form we find over the next few months. So this is the approach that we've taken. You start at entry level, and this is where we hope to encourage the vast majority of businesses. This is where all you need to do is pledge to get information and to make a decision after a year as whether you want to act or not. And you can walk away. If at the end you decide taking action is just not possible, it's just not feasible, then you walk away. But you still are a signatory to the covenant. After a year, you need to decide to take one action to reduce emissions, and that's with the help of a national or a European support programme. The covenant will let you know, thanks to all its partners and to the expertise that we have in the consortium, what those measures are that are available to you at national level or at European level. You have a year in which to complete that, and you then are recognised with a bronze seal. For silver, you commit. Sorry, I should go back and say that at the point of bronze, you then benefit from one-to-one technical assistance. And this is very, very attractive to companies because it gives them the direction that they need in order to make progress. Silver, we ask you to commit to take one or several measures to reduce your emissions. And again, you get the same level of one-to-one technical assistance along with peer learning, masterclasses, online information. Gold, obviously, what we're all hoping most companies will end up achieving or aiming for at least is to have taken all available measures in your sector. Now, this means that obviously we will have to have an exhaustive database or matrix of all those measures that exist. So we don't have that yet. That's something that we are working to have. But the idea is that by the end, we will have an encyclopedic database of every single measure or every single action a company could take within their sector. And in order to be able to see, obviously there will be gaps from one member state to another in terms of the speed with which they implement the policies or the type of financing they put at businesses' disposal. But the idea is obviously that this will eventually in time become exhaustive. The critical thing here is, I'll just say one thing, is that in all of this, the process is inclusive, so it's easy. It's got to be easy for SMEs. They don't have the time, they don't have the finance. I say this again, it has to be easy for them to do. It has to be rigorous though. They have to have proof that they have acted, because there can be no greenwashing. This just devalues the efforts of other, what everyone else is doing in general. So I just say, obviously, it's open to all 27 member states. This is another thing. Technical assistance has to be provided, obviously, in the language of the company or of the country in which the company is situated. English is not good enough, so this is why we are trialling it in different languages, but we can't do it all in 27. And finally, how to get involved? Well, if you're an SME or you know one, encourage them to make a pledge on our website. Or if you're an individual who's in this space, who's in the clean energy space, become an ambassador. Or if you are an organisation, a national authority, an energy agency, a support organisation, then join our partner network. And here is our website. And if you want to sign up to our newsletter, here's a QR code. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karen. I mean, so basically we had like very condensed story from the waste heat recovery, to the application of waste recovery, to the business models, to the audits and energy management systems, basically kind of like organizing the company's thinking to the kind of more kind of aspiring. So it's not being discussed here, and now we're open for questions from the audience.
One question. So I have a question for Karen, the last presentation. So I think many among us are a bit aware now that there's this potential diaspora of industrial partners and SMEs out of Europe. And I was wondering, is there any, about the fear that these kind of requirements can harm the competitivity of these SMEs in a way that, they harmed by the measurement. So have you thought about this? Do you have any mechanism in place to cope with it?
So on the SMEs, is there a perception amongst SMEs that they will be harmed by the regulations?
Yeah, basically by the fact that they need to deal with these measurements, it could harm their competitivity, right? Because they need to allocate funds probably to adopt these measurements, and also then, especially in these current times, how that can. Yeah.
So SMEs, by definition, are always against regulation. So you need to work with that. So the way we approach it is that you will not only, but they're motivated by cost. And the evidence suggests that if you put in place these measures, you will reduce your cost. I mean, we looked at the case of the supermarket, which was staggering. If you get something like that, then suddenly they change their mind. So it's very much how we get at it is that you will reduce your costs by being more energy efficient. So you will reduce your costs. The recent crisis, I know prices are coming down a bit now, but they're scarred by that. And they know that there will be future spikes in the future, and they don't want to have to go through that again. So the important thing is it's always positivity. You will reduce your costs, you're doing your thing for the planet, and you're saving money. So what's not to like? There's a huge benefit also for staff morale. We found that staff is very proud when their company take action, and customers and increasingly investors want companies that are doing the right thing.
Okay, if I can just bounce quickly on this one, or if perhaps I can go back to you later and we just.
You can ask further questions over the lunch.
Yeah.
I would really like to have a question on waste heat recovery. Because looking at the presentation today, that's kind of the key. this, but kind of, I think you wanted to, you have a question? Okay, all right. Everybody has something going for an hour, and I'm sure you all had the biscuits and things an hour ago, so it's not. I didn't see anybody on the verge of starvation. But just one question about waste heat recovery, and then I will let you go.
Yeah, thank you. One question.
Okay, two questions we have.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, one question. I mean, in working formulas about how to calculate the dollar energy savings, I will take for the proof of concept the most, let's say, complex. An example of having whatever producer of waste heat, and then they put it out of offsite to a district heating, for example, installation. So there is a good way to calculate what would be the energy savings. I skip the problem of who pays for that for the moment, but the question would be, who takes the credit for the energy savings? How do you split then this benefit? Because it could be different obligated parties, different even distribution networks, and it could be two worlds connected by pipe. I mean, is there a different formula for that, for example?
Let's take a second question so we can answer them together. But it's a very good question.
Yes, this question is also for Torben. My name is Elisabeth from EEIP. Not about the credits, but about the heat system, the heat grid. As you said, if you use your supermarket, that will be a different temperature than if you have a district heating grid. So what about the legislation and the ability for other heat resources to feed in? For instance, when we talk about open heat systems, are the use cases already there? Do you have recommendations in your projects for the legislation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can take the formula.
Okay, then I'll start with the answer about the formulas. I think this is very much up to what kind of scheme you have in place for Article 7, if it's only alternative measures, if it's an EEO, and also within the EEO, who is the obligated party, because of course, if only basically ESCOs are the ones that are obligated, and of course they will try to get that savings by paying industrial plants for feeding into the grid. So I think this is hard to say. The formula should be quite open for all of the versions, and I think apart from this is rather a thing about agreements, not on policy level, but rather on private company level.
Yeah, and on the on all the, you can say, agreements you need to make, I think that some of the main issues are really that we were used to have a kind of energy-wise a one-way flow. Suddenly you have a two-way flow, yeah, and it means that you need to get an agreement between the utilities and the end prosumer, you can say. And that's not easy, actually. Especially, our experience is that many of the utilities are quite conservative because they are operating at a heating network, and they want it very often to stay as it is. Yeah, don't touch too much. Yeah, and normally they are also used to the CSP plants, where you by free get very high temperature. So we have never had to think about what is really necessary. And if you go and talk to them, you will often get oh, we have a very old part of the city that needs that high temperature. So we need that high temperature for all the grid. And that's where the discussion has to start also, because likely there will be 2 or 3% where you really need the high temperature. And is that really justifying that you need that high temperature all over? Of course, you can sell very high temperature, but then your COP of your heat pump and the available waste heat is not so high, yeah, or not so big. So you're basically wasting again a lot of good energy. In many cases, 60 to 70 degrees is sufficient, especially for new layouts of grids. Of course, there are, if you have a district heating grid that is 80 years old or something, then you have, of course, you will have your challenges. Yeah. But it's every time that you have to go in, you have to educate those grid operators also, because the supermarket itself will be, I would say, they will go for it as soon as they see the business case, and the business case is super good.
Torben, thank you. I mean, we are bang on 58 minutes for the session, so we are on the hour. And thank you all. Thanks for the speakers, and enjoy your lunch.